Um, so this will be recorded so that we can share it with other people who couldn't attend, or for others who are interested in doing some role model engagement or learning about outreach opportunities. So thank you all for being here. I'm Jessie Herbert-Meny. I direct the Spectrum Discovery Area. Spectrum is a hands-on science center in Missoula. We're part of the University of Montana, and we're really happy to be part of the EPSCoR Cruise project. And I wanted to share with you today a resource that I love called Role Models Matter. And with the hope that it might give you an opportunity, if you're thinking about how you could engage with the public about your research or about your studies, this workshop I think has been really helpful. And I've done this workshop a lot, and oftentimes it's in person. So I hope it translates all right to Zoom. But thank you so much for being here. I want to share a little bit about the Role Model Matter workshop and where it came from. Spectrum has been participating in this program really for about, I think we got trained in 2016, and it's a program that came through TechBridge Girls, which is an organization that runs a number of after-school programs, primarily for girls to get them interested in science and technology. And they did a big study where they had role models come into their class, into their after-school programs, and explored what were those successful ingredients to get kids more engaged and understanding about the field, and so that role models also felt like they had a successful engagement. And one of the big questions was, what do you think of when you think of scientist? You might not be surprised that a lot of girls, when they drew a scientist, drew a chemist in a lab coat, glasses. And when they went through a number of programs where they were introduced to different scientists and engineers in the field and got a broader understanding of who holds these careers, they were then asked the same question and drew somebody who was maybe more relatable, might be like them. So it just helped broaden their understanding of who a scientist is and what a scientist might look like. So that is where this training came from. Spectrum and the University of Montana has then continued to offer these trainings even to other people who are in other fields besides science and technology, and have found that these elements of a role model engagement translate to programs that are also for boys. It's not just a program for girls. And even in the fields of like English, history, non-science fields, these are also just good things to keep in mind if you are going to engage with the public. So I want to start out, I'm going to just stop sharing for a moment so that I can see everybody's face and that we can all see each other. All right. Thanks so much for being here. I am just curious, we're going to do a little icebreaker. If you, and I want to just keep it really simple, but if you could use your reactions on Zoom, you should be able to find it at the bottom of your screen. I would love first to know where you're coming from. So if you are located on the western Montana, west of the divide, will you give a thumbs up? All right, about half of us. Okay, and if you are east of the divide, will you give a thumbs up? Excellent. And I see some people giving thumbs up for both. So we're traveling a lot perhaps and doing research in different parts of the state, and that is excellent. So now I'm curious to know, we're going to use the reactions again. You could use the thumbs up or any of these fun reactions that you might have here in Zoom. If you have done any kind of role model interaction with the public, will you give a clap or a thumbs up? All right. And if this is your first, if you've not ever done it, but you're interested in engaging with the public. Excellent. Thanks. This is great. Great information. All right. Thanks so much. During this presentation, if you have at all any, feel free to type anything in the chat or unmute yourself and ask a question. We are a small enough group too. That'll work just great. All right. I'm going to reshare my screen and hope that it. Are you guys seeing that same slide again? Okay, excellent. Okay. So we did an icebreaker. Thanks so much. Today's workshop, we're going to learn a few things, how people learn in informal settings, those components of a successful role model interaction, and if we have time, some facilitation pointers that I think might help you. And at the end, also some opportunities for you to get involved with presenting to the public and sharing your passion and your research with the public. So how do people learn? I'm curious, will you unmute and let me know, what do you see? Do you see an old woman?
I see a woman with a fancy hat.
I see a woman, a young woman with a fancy hat.
Yeah, I can see both, like an old woman or like a young woman kind of looking away.
Excellent. Yes, there is a young woman in this image and also an older woman with kind of a shawl here. So this is an optical illusion, but it also gets across the idea that we might see something and have see something different or understand something different. And if we come to present to the public, whether it's kids or adults, and if we just assume that they see what we see, we're going to miss an opportunity to really engage with them. So what could we do if you're showing them something? You could ask them, first of all, what do you see? Or ask them about their background knowledge or what it is that they know about a topic to first begin to understand where they're starting from, right? That way, you'll be able to engage with them better. You can use analogies, use known vocabulary, compare and contrast. So I want you to keep that in mind. That's always a good place to start when you're going to go into an interaction with them. People come into your experiences with different background knowledge, and we want to understand that. Okay, so now we're going to go into the components of a successful role model visit. There are 4 key things to keep in mind and some other things to think about. So a role model event, and I say role model event because you are all role models who are going to come into an experience to share about your research. You might be asked as a special guest. It's a similar terminology, or as an educator or facilitator. And no matter what the term is, if you're going to share with somebody about the work you do, here are some key things you want to keep in mind. An icebreaker, a personal story, some kind of activity as interactive as possible, and an opportunity for reflection. So those 4 things are going to let your audience, the students or the adults who come to you, understand better what you do and how it relates to the world. Some other things to think about that we'll talk about are themes. What is the theme of your interaction, and props? What might you want to bring with you? So let's kind of break all those down piece by piece. So we did a quick little icebreaker early on, and you thank so much for doing such a great job using your Zoom reactions. And why do we do icebreakers? It's really not the point to learn kids' name, everybody's name in the room, and to remember that, unless potentially you're going to be with them for the full day or a week. But if you're just doing a quick interaction, the reason for your icebreaker is to make the people feel more comfortable with you and with the ability to share. So asking them a question where they actually respond early on that's easy to answer. What do you study? What's your favorite pizza? I mean, silly things like that. Any kind of thing to help just let them talk to you. If you're doing Zoom, the interactions work great. The little reactions, asking people to respond in some way or type something in the chat, just gets people interacting. You could also introduce a new topic that you might not sure if they're aware about. An icebreaker might just be like, for example, I just asked, have you ever done a role model interaction? That lets me know where you are. You can introduce new vocab, and it's just a good opportunity to get people talking and interacting sooner so that they'll interact with you throughout the time you're with them. Any questions about the icebreakers? I love icebreakers more than most people probably, but I would, so this doesn't have to be a long interaction. An icebreaker can be really quick, but I would really encourage you to not skip over this. It's a very important part of the experience so that people feel comfortable interacting with you. Now, maybe you're only with, you're engaging with just one other person or family. So the icebreaker could just be like, hey, what's your name? Where do you go to school? Or what are you studying? But any of those moments just to get them interacting. Okay, moving on. So the second component was a role model's personal story. And I want to share that this does not have to be the second thing you do. It should be kind of woven throughout. You could do part of your story before you lead a group through an introduction or an icebreaker. But some of the things you want to think about are, what should people know about you? Why are you sharing an activity with them, or why are you presenting to their group? And I want you to think more about, not just about what you do or where you do it, but think about how you got there, or why you do it. What's the passion behind what you're doing? It doesn't need to be very long, but using kid-friendly language, making it personal, thinking about your career path. How did you afford it? Especially for high school students you might be interacting with, is a big thing they might be thinking about. Were there obstacles that you had to overcome? Or maybe it's just a story about something that happened to you when you were younger that got you on the path. Was there somebody who really inspired you, or was there some experience? Those stories are really meaningful to kids and make you more relatable. So you become the person who's not just the expert on some topic presenting to the class, but you are you're a real person, right? Maybe you want to share about the hobbies you do outside of the field you're in. What do you do for fun? All of those kind of things make students realize that if you did it, they could do it, because they might see something that you, something in you reflected in themselves. And so that's why you want to be sure to share something, some part of your story. So I'm going to ask you guys, like I said, to kind of go beyond the what, the when, or the where you do something, but try to get to that how and why. And if we could just reflect for a moment, and I'm going to do an activity called a chat cascade. If you could reflect for one moment and share, just type it out, but don't hit enter yet. Type it in the chat. What's one thing that you would want to include in your personal story? In your story of how you got to where you are. I think I see people typing. All right, you hit enter. Susie, hit the gun early, all right? Everybody, on the count of 3, that's okay, hit enter. Excellent. I love it. So if you look through, I'm seeing things like you like to spend time outside. There's not a timeline, like you don't have to have a timeline for your progress. It doesn't need to be the same as everyone else. That's a great, recognition of obstacles that you might come across. Oh, sharing about the people you've met along the way. That's great. Talking about your support systems who helped you is really excellent to remind kids also, right, that who were their support systems. The love of nature. So, and the love of art and communication. So these are excellent. This story, Jessica, thank you. Talking about those struggles and overcoming, if you didn't get great grades before, like that's not a barrier for progress. So excellent. Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna click back. Okay, are you guys seeing this theme? This was something to keep in mind. So while you're sharing, I'm curious, I want you to think about what's the big concept of what you do and that you would like for students to take away. There's probably a whole lot of different things you do in your field, and you can't share about all of them. So what's one key thing? Maybe it's why your work is important and how it's relevant, or what's like the big question you're answering. Keeping that main theme in mind will help keep you focused as you share about what you're doing. All right, and the second thing to just keep in mind with your interaction is having some kind of prop. Let's see, the world is so different right now and we're over Zoom. And so you might not actually be going in person. I'm curious, do you guys want to unmute and just share, would you feel comfortable trying to interact with kids over Zoom?
I think it sounds intimidating.
Yeah, interacting with adults almost seems more comforting than interacting with children over Zoom.
Interacting with, and that's great. And I focus so often on interactions with kids, and it's not, it doesn't have to be, right? Interactions with adults, these similar things, you should keep these things in mind as well as you're interacting with adults. So I mentioned props because, especially with kids, it's just fun. It draws people in. So you maybe in your research, you work with a specific tool or technology that you could bring and show and try to explain what it is or how it works. Maybe if you are presenting over Zoom or in a virtual setting, showing pictures of you out in the field or doing your research kind of helps people give a sense of really what you do. And if you are going into a classroom, if things are, of course, you want to keep in mind nothing too fragile, or and trying to have things big enough for people to actually see. When the world is right and you might be with a group and you can hand something around, that's important so that everybody can see things. And maybe you have more than one item that you would want to bring. And just keeping in mind that it builds suspense if you only show one item at a time. So it's a really great tool to bring items in a bag and pull an item out of the bag. For kids, it's the best. They're so curious, what is in the bag? What's coming out next? So keeping in mind those things. And if you can't bring something from your research or from your work, is there perhaps something that is a facsimile or something that you could kind of demonstrate how something works? Okay, so the third component of a role model interaction is planning an activity, preferably something interactive. Now this, in a role model engagement activity, should be like the activity should take up the majority of your time. Depending on what you're doing, this might have to be really quick and short. So at Spectrum, most of our role model engagements last between 20 minutes to an hour. We'll have a special guest come into a camp or into our museum. And so the activity should try to take up quite a bit of that time. You don't need necessarily to come up with an activity on your own. Spectrum and I know with the EPSCoR outreach team are here to help. We have a number of activities that you could consider to bring, or if you were going to a science museum to share about your research, they often have a lot of hands-on activities. But the question could be just, what are the kids going to do, or what are your visitors going to do when you're with them? Something that's participatory, you could even ask them to have paper with them and be writing or drawing. Try to solve a problem or pick something that you might be passionate about. I'm going to show you a few examples, and then afterwards, I'm just curious if anything looks interesting to you, or if you've had, or if there's any big ideas for activities that you have in mind. So here's some various examples that I've seen role models and special guests bring or facilitate. This is a CubeSat activity. So in this, let's see, can you see my little mouse? Okay. In this little pink box here is your CubeSat that's going to be launched into space. And it's pretty small, but you need to fit certain items on it. And so you have to put it together. This is pretty straightforward. It's a box with some blocks. And really interactive. It gives kids a challenge to try to put enough items that'll fit in here so that your satellite will be able to launch and be able to send information back. There's one example. In the neuroscience realm, building a brain cell with pipe cleaners and beads. Really straightforward. Kids can build the axon and the soma and the axons and learn about neurons and how they, in this image here, they're putting them together so they're communicating. In the environmental sciences, ecosystem sciences, there's activities related to water pollution. So this is just a small tray with sand and materials, and you can drop water and see where it goes and talk about maybe non-point source pollution and how water travels. This activity here was an eDNA activity to talk about how they detected mussels in the watershed. So that was, so there's a whole variety, and you can see she's got hula hoops. I mean, how fun, right? See. Perhaps your work is in spatial imaging. This is a little different, but was a super fun one, doing perspective photography. This person's getting crushed by a cup. Or maybe they're really just doing some photography experiences or looking at maps. I mean, these are all great activities to do. So there's quite a few examples. And of course, the internet has a wide amount of resources, and the EPSCoR outreach team has a lot of resources as well that we could share. So I'm just curious in a moment if anybody has an idea for an activity that either they've seen before and have loved, or has or would like to try with students.
I don't have an idea, but I was curious do you recall what the hula hoops had to do with eDNA?
I think that kids, let me go back to this image. I think that Lily put, this is, I think she had the hula hoops in different places, and kids moved between the hula hoops and maybe left behind information together. And I could find out more about this activity to share that.
That sounds about right. I buy that one. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, right, it's some of these concepts that you guys are doing research on and studying can be really complex. And so trying to think about what is like one piece of that. I mean, getting back to that theme, right? What is one thing that your audience, whatever age group that might be able to glean from you? Again, this activity doesn't have to be super long, but it really is helpful if it could take up, or it could be part of a large component of your time with the students. All right, so let's see, speaking of the time, all right. What's the last thing in a role model interaction? Anybody remember?
Reflection.
Thank you. Yeah, a good quiz there. All right, yeah, reflection. So reflecting with the students, with your visitors, I should say, whether it's students, young kids, oops, or or adults, having some time for reflection. If you're with younger kids, having somebody raise their hand and share something they learned, or maybe share what was their favorite part of the activity if you're with a group. Or with older students, you could have them write it down, and then you can collect notes at the end. You could try to reflect on what how they might use this activity in the future, how it relates to other fields, how, there's a lot of different things you could do, but giving some opportunity to reflect on what activity you just did and how it relates. All right, and we're going to do that at the end too. So those are your four key things, right? The first, icebreaker, introductions, role model story, an interactive activity, and a reflection. Those don't always need to be in that order, right? We mentioned that the role model story might be woven throughout. Reflection could be woven throughout as well. But those four things, if you include all of those when you're visiting with the public, the research has shown they'll be more engaged, walk away understanding more, being more excited to learn more. All right, so now I want to go in a little bit to some facilitation pointers, depending on, and this might look really different depending on what type of experience you're going into. You might, like I said, at Spectrum, we have role models that come into our camps. So that's maybe you're interacting with a dozen or so students at one time that are 6 years old. Or maybe you've been asked to go into a high school class with 25 sophomores. Or perhaps, and often you could go to an outreach event over the summer. Hopefully, knock on wood, there might be some small in-person gatherings. I don't know. Or maybe you're going to be on Zoom and a class has asked you to Zoom in and just share with their students what you do. A lot of different types of engagement you could do. And when you're doing that, we want you to also think about how you engage students. This slide used to be only about engaging quiet students, and then we realized this is kind of works when you're also in a virtual setting as well, because everybody tends to be a lot quieter on Zoom or in virtual meetings. So some things you can do while you're engaging with kids is doing a think, pair, share. Pair might be a little difficult on Zoom, but what this is you give people time to think about a question you've posed. Maybe you've asked, then you pair them up with a person to share what they were thinking about. So they kind of have a one-on-one interaction, and then they share out with the group. This is really helpful, especially in an in-person setting. But you could do a think share, right? Definitely give people time to think, write it down, and then share out, and just skip the pairing part in a virtual setting. Giving them the wait time and think time. I often count in my head to 10. If I pose a question, I then wait and count to 10 before moving on. And often, and I noticed it earlier, somebody finally speaks up. because people get uncomfortable with the silence. So you have to get comfortable with the silence to give people time to think and then feel comfortable sharing. The thumbs up and thumbs down on Zoom, that's great. You could do the reactions. In an in-person, if you're in a classroom, just asking people to give a thumbs up if they enjoyed an activity or if they're thinking about college, lets people give feedback without having to speak up. And giving people an opportunity to first write down ideas and then share. So we did that chat cascade earlier. That works pretty well on Zoom. And that can work in an in-person setting too, in a classroom. So keeping in mind that, because it's good to engage those quiet students when you come into a classroom. Let's see, some other strategies to engage students is using questions to promote learning and giving specific feedback. So we'll go into those two things, questions and feedback. Look at the time here, we're doing good. Great. So when we think about questioning, if you're bringing an activity to a group of students, you want to ask them open-ended questions. And like we said earlier, give them time after you've posed a question for them to answer. So open-ended questions are open-ended. They're not a simple yes or no question, right? So what would happen if is an open-ended question. And these are some higher level questions also to really promote higher level thinking. So what changes would you recommend if they're trying to design something? What would you do? How would the scenario be different? What are some real world applications? These kind of questions get kids thinking and not just answering like a quick yes or no. This takes practice. And oftentimes when we're doing role model, when we're doing educator trainings or workshops with role models, we actually sometimes give you a prop. Here I've got a bouncy ball, and ask you to teach something about the bouncy ball by only asking questions. So that's a challenge for you to think about too. Like, how would you teach something by only asking questions? But that's going to be much more engaging than if you just teach about a bouncy ball and how it works. Okay, and then we also have giving feedback. So during an activity, you want to give kids feedback, but be really specific. It's super easy if you see a kid going through an activity, or that maybe they've completed the challenge. It's really easy to just say, good job, but that doesn't tell them a whole lot. So you want to be specific, and some examples where you could say, I really like how you drew this image, or I saw you were using a lot of effort, focusing on their behavior. This is really interesting because, or you were the only group that tried it that way, saying, oh my goodness, I've never seen that before. That type of feedback is a lot more specific, and it's a lot more helpful for the students. It really gives them a sense that they've a sense of accomplishment, especially if they're being recognized for their efforts. They worked really hard and it paid off. That is better than just saying good job or not giving any feedback at all. Okay. Let's see, so we are going to do a quick reflection. I'm curious, would somebody share one thing that might have found helpful or something that you've learned from this workshop?
I was going to say, I really, what you just presented, using or asking questions to teach about something. I've never heard that before. It's kind of like a fun challenge on the presenter's end to think about that.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a challenge you all to try it. It can be any fun object, but if you can grab a friend and try to teach them something by only asking questions, you'll learn a lot. Yeah.
I like the suggestion of like a use of a prop to keep people interested.
Thanks, Laurel. Do you have an idea of what prop you might bring with you?
For my research, I make these little like microbial cellulose capsules, and they're kind of interesting looking. So yeah, I'd probably bring those.
Awesome. Sounds so cool. I'm curious, if anybody, could you maybe do a thumbs up if you are feeling like ready to try any of these things with a group of students?
Jessie, I typed in the chat too. The Zoom thing is a little bit scary, so it's been fun to kind of noodle on that while you're presenting and think about how, I mean, I think this is going to be how, it's going to be part of what we do for quite a while. And in a way, it can help us reach people that we would not have reached, but it has its own challenges. So it's been nice to think about how we can make it interactive and personal.
Yeah, thanks, Susie. Yeah, Zoom is definitely has its challenges, and we've gotten used to these virtual meetings, possibly with our own work groups and teams or classmates. But in a setting where you're presenting, it's definitely different. And we all have, I mean, we've heard so much about Zoom fatigue, and that's real. And so trying anything fun and different can be scary, but it'll really work out in the end. I don't know if many of you were on at the very beginning. I was really attempting to have music playing when you came in, which when I come into meetings and there's music, I'm immediately like more excited. But even I was just really struggling even then to get it to work. I haven't tried it enough. So it just takes practice. And if anybody does use music in their meetings and knows the secret, I want to learn. Anything else? Did somebody want to share?
I was muted. I think it's interesting that one of the 4 things is to share your personal story, which, I mean, that makes sense if there is a role model element. But I just what people put in the chat, I mean, I thought it was all really interesting. So
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, thanks. And I really appreciated seeing what everybody put in the chat, because all of these, those are short things that are easy to share, and they just really hit home to people. And any opportunity that you have to be more relatable to a student is going to inspire them that much more. And that is what I really work for, is trying to find that passion and that inspiration in students and help to just get them excited. And so when you as a scientist are sharing why you're passionate and how you got interested and how you persevered, I mean, those really do make a difference. Kids hear it, and you might not think that it makes a difference, but I've seen that it really does. So I wanted to leave you guys with, we're getting to the end. I think we'll get out a little earlier than the hour. So I wanted to leave you guys with some opportunities. Oops. Some opportunities. If you are like, okay, I think I might be ready to try something, or I really want to share what I do with kids in Montana and with the public, then there are some opportunities this summer, although they might be a little quite different, of course. So like I said, I direct the Spectrum Discovery area. We do a number of summer camps. Camps are in person, but we'll be Skyping or Zooming in role models any chance we get. So there's a variety of topics. And if you were interested in engaging with kids somewhere between the age of 6 and 14, we would so love to have you. And I know I think I speak for other science museums across Montana who feel the same. So there's a lot of opportunities there. If you're in Western Montana, Spectrum also does a number of outreach visits. Only a few of them potentially will be in person with social distancing and outdoors. This summer might be different, but maybe next summer we'll be back in swing. Those are always great opportunities for role models to come and share what they do and share an activity. We also have, there's a number of online ways to share about what you do. If you wanted to share a bio with us, we have a STEM role model website. There's the EPSCoR newsletter and the Montana Girls STEM Collaborative newsletter that's been sharing out great role model stories and bios. And this picture right here, we also printed out some role model bios and stuck them in some take-home science kits. So if you're thinking maybe you're not ready to do the in-person interaction yet, but you'd like to share your story and help inspire kids, that might be a great way to share what you do. And connecting with families at local science museums. At Spectrum, we have what we call a discovery bench, and we do a different activity every day. And it's always great to have a role model come and share. Now, we've been closed for a year and we're still closed, but sometime this summer, this spring or summer, we might open in Missoula. And as we can, we'd love to have people come in. I know that other science museums in Montana are either open or starting to open as well. So those kind of interactions are great because you also have educators at those museums to help you with your interaction. They can help you find the activity to bring and interact with kids. And it can often be like a quick visits. But if you are interested in any of those kind of opportunities, let's go to the next slide. Please reach out to me if you're interested, especially in anything in the Western Montana area. And then Susie Taylor, who's on this call. Susie is at MSU and has a lot of connections in the Bozeman area for different opportunities. Of course, right now, those are limited, but we'll start to open and there may be more. And if you're interested in at least hearing about them and knowing about some possibilities, we'd be happy to share those with you. So you can reach out to us at any time. I will put also in the chat my email so that you have that as well. All right. Are there any questions? Susie, would you mind putting in the chat your email as well? Thanks so much. Well, thank you guys all so much. We're at 3:50, so I'm not going to keep your time. This has been recorded, so I'll be sharing that with Shell, and it should be available. And please please reach out to me if you do have any questions or follow-up comments. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Jessie.
Thank you, Jessie.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jessie.
See
Thank
ya.
you.
Bye.